Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my channel. This is the Paranormal Christian. Today we're going to talk about an experience that really hits close to home for me. And that experience is called sleep paralysis. It's this supposed sleep condition where your mind wakes up before your body does. So when we go to sleep, our brain releases a chemical that paralyzes our body. This is so that we don't act out our dreams. People where that doesn't work very well they tend to sleepwalk or take off running down the street in their sleep. So the idea with sleep paralysis is that your mind wakes up before your body does. So your body and all of your muscles are paralyzed. And you can't move, you can't speak, you can barely open your eyes to look around the room. Obviously, this frightening state to be in. The idea is that once you are in this state, you're awake, you're aware, but because your body is still asleep, you can have what's called hypnagogic hallucinations. This is when you're sort of bringing some of your dreams into the room with you. So you start hallucinating. At least that's the medical theory anyway. We'll get into my opinions on whether or not I think that's a hot piece of garbage. But we're going to be watching and reacting to a video together that I think is from the psychological scientific approach of sleep paralysis. We'll see what they have to say, and then I'm going to offer my own thoughts at the end. Thank you for tuning into the channel. Let's dig right in. All right, let's get it.
I just felt like there was somebody kind of around.
Y me estaba observando, era un tipo como un señor, digamos, ¿no?
All around the world, people are experiencing the same terrifying vision in their sleep.
It was just a black silhouette, completely black.
So right off the bat here, I will say this. When you wake up in sleep paralysis, at least some of the time, there is this overwhelming sense that something dark is in the room and looking at you. It makes you want to keep your eyes shut. Could that just be a part of the medical explanation phenomenon? Let's see.
I couldn't make out any features.
I never saw a face or eyes, but just this dark kind of outline of a man.
The Hat Man.
A tall man with some type of a brimmed hat.
Seen all around the world.
And the one in the middle was always the guy in the middle. He had a hat on. It was obviously the boss.
And listen to the different languages. I mean, people are seeing the Hat Man in all cultures.
When your heart is beating, so fast you think you're gonna die.
Why are people everywhere having the same nightmare?
Good question.
I'm Corinne Pertil. This
Hello,
is
Corinne.
Quartz. Subscribe to our channel for more videos.
Quartz News, go subscribe.
The vision is virtually the same everywhere. I collected accounts from forums, chat rooms, books, and interviews, and noticed a few common themes. He is dark. He is featureless. He wears a hat. And when people see him, they feel paralyzed, unable to speak, a crushing sense of breathlessness, like something evil is pressing on their chests. And when they're finally able to move, he's gone.
I haven't seen
Not
him here,
always.
but I fear him. I do for sure.
I wanted to speak to someone who could make sense of all of this.
I think it is a real challenge for the kind of scientific explanations to explain why some of these themes seem to crop up time and time again.
Chris is a psychologist who studies paranormal experiences.
Well, that's an interesting
He says people
field.
who see things like the Hat Man aren't crazy or lying. That fear and that vision is real, but the explanation has a lot more to do with culture than ghosts.
If
Let's
you
hear it.
look at the way it's interpreted across different cultures, that's absolutely fascinating.
Hey! Get out of our shot!
Because you've got the same core experience, but it's kind of got this cultural overlay.
Bueno, aunque la gente me dice que esto es algo dice que es natural de un trastorno del sueño y toda esa cosa, pero otra cosa es que uno lo viva, lo sienta, porque para mí eso es algo espiritual, digamos, son ataques demoníacos, digamos.
This nightmarish figure has inspired art and myths across cultures and history.
Yes.
In Assyria and Babylon, an evil spirit was said to leap upon unsuspecting victims as they slept. In ancient Greece, a doctor wrote of a demon that visited his patients at night and pressed upon their chests. Similar specters appear in folktales told from the Arctic to Japan to Newfoundland. And for most of history, no one knew why. By the late 20th century, the science of sleep evolved to offer another explanation. It's called sleep paralysis.
Sleep paralysis.
Stuck in a state where you're awake, but the only thing you can do is move your eyes, breathe.
Alon Avedon
just
is the
as I said.
director of the Sleep Disorders Center at UCLA. He says we're always paralyzed while we dream. That's normal.
So you don't act out
When
your
the brain
dreams.
wakes up before the body does, that's sleep paralysis.
You cannot scream, you cannot talk.
In fact, a lot of people experience
Does it make sense to say when your brain wakes up before your body does? See, that's just like a really naturalistic way to say that. They want to say brain and body so that it keeps everything scientific and don't want any room for any possibility for any kind of paranormal or supernatural experiences here.
sleep paralysis, and it can come with terrifying visions. Sleep scientists have a specific term for this.
One unique parasomnia is called terrifying hypnagogic hallucinations. What happens is the patient wakes up and they start seeing images of other people who are trying to hurt them.
But even Avedon says he doesn't understand why all those hallucinations are so similar.
It's fascinating in that
Right, because hallucinations are individual experiences. If I'm tripping out on some shrooms, the hallucinations, just like dreams, would be isolated private events only going on in the single individual's mind. So how do you account for people across cultures, across the world, seeing the same figures? That is really interesting. Let's hear what science has to say about it.
you take individuals across different geographic entities, and yet the dreams seem to be similar. Why does it happen? Why are the dreams not pleasant?
Chris, the psychologist, thinks he might have an idea.
Chris, the psychologist.
Sleep paralysis visions are shaped by cultural influences the dreamer may not even be consciously aware of. For example, that man in the hat looks an awful lot like a figure we've come to associate with horror.
Who the hell is that?
The Hat Man, when I sat and thought about it, the thing that came to my mind was Freddy Krueger and the kind of Nightmare on Elm Street films were actually directly inspired by sleep paralysis.
Yes, the Nightmare on Elm Street films were inspired by sleep paralysis, and Freddy Krueger was inspired by the stories people would tell about their sleep paralysis experience. The Hat Man visions, hallucinations, whatever you want to call them, came way before Freddy Krueger ever did. So to say that the reason why people are seeing the Hat Man all over the world is because they watched some Freddy Krueger when they were a kid, if that's what they're saying, seems a bit ridiculous. That's certainly putting the cart before the horse. And we'll get into this a lot more, but if you look at stories from around the world, there are people in their 80s and 90s talking about seeing the Hat Man when they were 5, 10, 12 years old, well before Nightmare on Elm Street. So you can't say that the reason why people are seeing this figure is due to some kind of subconscious memory of some of the classic horror films. Also, not everybody's even seen the movie, so...
This notion that you can be attacked when you're asleep, that's when you're vulnerable. And of course, Krueger wears a hat.
There's still no definitive answer for why some people see these shadowy visitors. But those who do don't have to be haunted by them forever.
Treatment for this is to have the patient relive and re-experience the hallucination during wakefulness, during the day, and begin to imagine positive emotions or associate positive emotions with that image.
In truth, there is no stranger lurking in the corners of our rooms at night. The Hat Man is only in our minds, and that may be even scarier.
I like how they admit that They don't have a definitive answer to why people are seeing the same figure everywhere. And then she just ends the video by saying, the Hat Man is all in our minds. How do you know that? If this was to be some sort of psychological explanation for these experiences, this was a terrible attempt. And here's another reason why. The Hat Man is not just seen during sleep paralysis episodes. The Hat Man is seen all over the world by people who's never even had sleep paralysis, and in a lot of times, broad daylight. Now, I don't have an issue with a psychological or medical approach. I used to believe that these experiences were purely psychological. It was comforting to think that. But as I had more and more experiences of my own, and then that caused me to do research into other people's experiences, like I said earlier in the video, it just doesn't have the explanatory power to say that it's this collective, imaginative hallucination because Freddy Krueger. It doesn't explain why cultures all over the world and throughout time has seen the same figure. It doesn't explain that people have seen this figure outside of sleep paralysis. It's a real big stretch to just say, oh, the Hat Man is all in our minds. Maybe it is, but you didn't do a very good job convincing me of that. I have had sleep paralysis my whole life, but my Hat Man experience happened at Thanksgiving dinner, seen by multiple people in the room. So I know that the Hat Man is some kind of figure, whether that be demonic or something. How that ties in with sleep paralysis, I don't know. But I know that people who have never even heard of the Hat Man, they'll have sleep paralysis and see the Hat Man. And people that has never had sleep paralysis or heard of the Hat Man also see the Hat Man. And whatever the explanation is, medical, spiritual, or otherwise, it has to answer all of those questions. You can't just cut out half of the experiences and just sort of fit it into your little psychological sleep paralysis explanation 5-minute video. I'm not saying that I know exactly what this stuff is. There may very well be a natural explanation out there somewhere. So far, I haven't really heard a good one yet. I would like to hear from anyone watching this video. Have you ever had sleep paralysis? Have you ever seen the Hat Man? Was it only in sleep paralysis that you saw the figure? Did you see the Hat Man outside of sleep paralysis? So yeah, feel free to leave that in the comments below, and let's start talking about these things. Well, that's going to do it for the video today. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Paranormal Christian. I am going to link below some of the Reddit forums and maybe a couple other websites that's just filled to the brim with stories of people seeing this figure, and a lot of which, if not most of which, has nothing to do with sleep paralysis. The interesting thing is, why is there any correlation with sleep paralysis at all? And of course, these are the questions not being addressed. And I'm not taking away from a scientific view. Science is supposed to be this field where we look at things from a naturalistic point of view. So though I appreciate and very much value some of these explanations, if we do in fact live in a world where there are spiritual realities, then you would expect to find some scientific explanations wanting. It's like using a yardstick to measure how much you love your mom. It's the wrong tool, because it won't be able to account for the whole spectrum of physical, spiritual reality.